Alright, let's do this one last time. I've been working on a game inspired by Persona, Grandia, and Yakuza Like a Dragon, and for the last 3 years, it's gone through ups and downs. I'm pretty sure you know the rest. I've prototyped it a bunch of different ways, learned new skills, tried to make a deck builder, revised it again, and again, and again, and I did this. But after everything, I still love working on this game. Because you shouldn't make a JRPG as your first game, but someone's gotta do it. And you're looking at them.
Well, it's been nearly 6 months since my last devlog, and this script has been sitting in my Google Docs folder since December 2023? Oh no. Since that time, a number of things have changed in exciting ways, and with that excitement in mind, I needed a lot more time to manage these developments. In December, I chose an engine and got busy to learn the ins and outs of how it worked. Since I chose Unreal,
that meant I'm working with blueprints. They seem like a pretty solid option if you're a visual learner like myself. I'm gonna be honest though, I'm sure all these drop-downs have a purpose within the engine, but like, what am I looking at here?
Is there like a look gooder slider somewhere?
I started playing around with movement and then, of course, ran into my first issue.
My controller doesn't work. Great.
So it turns out Unreal only works with an Xbox controller natively, which is a choice. Since I'm not just going to go to the local GameStop and spend $100 on a new Xbox controller, I decided the best option was to see what the scholars of r/Unreal Engine had to say. Not super helpful. But don't worry, I'm going to show you a forbidden LEGO Fortnite building technique only for the bravest of developers. And there we go. Just make sure you add the Epic Launcher first and the Unreal Editor second. Thank you, Steam API. With this in place, I decided that was enough work for the week and moved on to some more artistic endeavors.
Layer 1. Environment.
I'll be honest, learning 3D was something that took all of my brain power to figure out. I feel fairly competent at it now, but that's through a lot of trial and error. One of the biggest hurdles to getting a solid workflow was that many of the tutorials available are geared at VFX, motion graphics, or photorealistic renders, so figuring out how to replicate the style of a PS2 game was more nuanced. Luckily, I've had some wonderful folks to help me develop some go-to techniques. First, let's talk about the environment. Many PS2 games were lit similarly to more recent games using something called baked lighting. Baked lighting essentially renders the lighting prior to loading the scene and creates a lit texture to replace the unlit texture. Real-time lights do the opposite and calculate light every frame for any object within the light's fall-off. However, most games didn't have real-time or even baked per pixel shading, and were instead shaded per vertex. If you don't know what that means, essentially the shading is calculated at the individual points that make up the geometry versus calculated per pixel based on a rendered image. A famous example of an older game with per pixel lighting is 2001's Silent Hill 2. All of this could have been avoided with therapy. Real-time lighting is costly, and baking lighting isn't necessarily as cheap as other techniques, so developers were often looking for other solutions to speed up the game while preserving fidelity and atmosphere, one of which being vertex colors. Recently, I got to sit down and spend some time learning from another developer named Moth on their techniques for using vertex colors to light a scene. Moth is developing a game called Blood Crisis, inspired heavily by the Kingdom Hearts series. You should absolutely check them out.
Go on, do it.
They showed me that by using the colors set to a multiply blend mode, we can darken the values of the texture under the vertex color and mimic shading. So prepped with this new information, let me break down how I model an environment. Step 1, let's set the size of the environment. This looks good. Make some walls? Okie dokie. Pillars? Why not?
Some buildings for this rooftop, maybe a clock, some extra details, benches. Oh yeah, you gotta have pipes. HVAC machine? Oh my god, we gotta make sure this rooftop's up to code. I don't want no OSHA violations. We gotta put the fences up in case somebody trips and falls into the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man fog I'm using to hide the fact that there's no building. So now that we've got any potential lawsuits covered, let's set up a shader, switch to vertex paint mode, paint in some shadows, take a break to do that funny little thing in Symphony of the Night with shield canceling. Remember, you're a professional. Add some shadow and lighting cards to keep the geometry clean, and voila, we're done. Using shadow and lighting cards is a cheap way to simulate complex shadows,
specifically because of the way vertex colors are applied. The points you can apply colors are dependent on the density of your geometry, and one quad is a lot cheaper than a bunch of subdivisions to accomplish the same goal. So with that, I think we're just about done. Many of these techniques, to Moth's best estimation, is how the lighting was done in Persona 3 and 4, especially with the lighting in the halls of Gekkoukan High and the class in Persona 4. Another interesting technique is how the floor in Polonium Mall was done. After trying to parse whether it was a cube map or some kind of shader trickery, Moth pointed me to a technique that was used in Kingdom Hearts 2. A desaturated version of the same model was mirrored and placed under the floor. They then painted in an alpha mask on the floor with vertex colors to remove where they wanted the reflection to show through. Because it's actual geometry, it should move in perspective to the player. I decided to make a few more shaders just to do some experimentation, then moved on to the next task.
Layer 2. Character modeling.
Let me break down how I model a character. First, I pull up one of my pre-made character templates. These have their proportions already set, and it saves me a lot of work when modeling. I also use a mirror modifier so that I can keep the model symmetrical. Second, I model the clothes directly onto the model. Third, I model the face. It doesn't have to be perfect for now, but this gives a rough idea of the size of the head. Usually I adjust facial proportions during texturing. After this, I model the hair starting with a 3/4 sphere and extruding pieces out until it matches the shape I want. This is the most difficult step for me, but with patience, we get the result we're after.
Any accessories that the geometry would be too small to make part of the mesh efficiently,
I model as a separate object and join into the mesh. We can see this is used for something like Kanji's nose ring or the buttons on his uniform. Now that we have our base mesh created, we move on to the next step, UV mapping, which basically goes find the seams, unwrap, overlap anything you don't want to paint twice, organize it, and
That's what I'm talking about. Jeez.
once it's unwrapped, we select all our faces and export the UV map to Clip Studio Paint. We make a new document that's 1024 by 1024. I choose this size because it's a nice texel density and is pretty easy to work with. The most common texture size on the PS2 was 256 by 256, so often characters with more complex geometry would have multiple texture maps applied to them to preserve fidelity. I could go for accuracy, but in this case, having more texture maps applied to an object increases the amount of draw calls that the computer has to make to render the image on screen. So a lot of times it's a dance between preserving fidelity and preserving performance. I save it as a PSD file so we can work with layers and have it update on the model in Blender in real time. Once we've checked everything is lined up and we've done a rough draft of the features, I refine until we have something worthy of a place in the Louvre, or at least texturesresource.com. With that, our model is finished, and we can take a moment to give ourselves a pat on the back and realize we're only going to have to do this hundreds of more times.
Layer 3. Animation.
When I originally recorded the script for this video, I'd planned to do kind of a tutorial section on how to go through the process of animation in a more basic way, breaking down like an idle animation or a walk cycle. But I'm still learning a lot of new techniques, and I felt like I wasn't really prepared to do kind of a tutorial or a lesson, especially since I've just been learning animation for the last year and a half. So what I've decided to do instead is to show some of my favorite animations that I've done so far, and maybe just to do a little bit of commentary on what my ideas were. Firstly, I want to talk about the updated design of the protagonists you've been seeing throughout the video. This design was done by an artist that I'm going to talk about near the end of the video, but they've been integral in solidifying the style of the characters. They gave the protagonist the canonical name Haruka now, but you'll still be able to rename Haruka in-game, as with most classic JRPGs. Their animations have been really fun to start experimenting with to make sure that even though you control their actions, they still have a distinct personality. So far, combat animations have definitely been my favorite thing to work on. I also went through and updated the models for a lot of my older designs of the enemies called Noimata. The straitjacket Noimata are the most common type that you'll see on the overworld, and once their cage breaks open, they turn into all different kinds of enemies that are based off of urban legends, whether they're on the internet or cultural. Specifically, this one is based off of the anatomical models that you find in the Seven School Mysteries, which is a popular Japanese urban legend. This character is named Mika, and she's one of your best friends and a classmate that also becomes entangled in the conspiracy of the cage system throughout the story. Next up, we have Lapina, who is the AI guide to the other world, and what more do I need to say? I love him. He is my sweet baby boy. And finally, we have the character that you've seen modeled throughout the video, whose name is Melody, who is another really important character in terms of lore, and she's sort of the catalyst of the first act of the story, and I'm in love with her design. I think it's one of the artist's best from the new batch, and I'm so excited for you to see how she's written, because she's one of the funnest characters to write.
Layer 4. Team.
Well, we've had some fun today, and I hope this has given you an appreciation for the techniques of the past. In our day-to-day, we often spend most of our time looking at what's new and exciting, and forget that many of our most groundbreaking tech started with humble beginnings, formed out of the strict limitations of certain hardware, software, and deadlines. Just because we can 3D print almost anything, doesn't mean we have to forget how to sculpt from clay, or pick up some wood and a knife, and to make something beautiful. In game development, anything is on the table, and can exist alongside each other. You just have to find what works for you, and learn how to make something beautiful. Or just make spaghetti on a countertop. That's fine too.
Before I go, I want to introduce some of the folks who have been assisting me over the last few months. Things started as a very casual back and forth, but have evolved into these folks becoming key players in our growing dev team. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our art director and character designer, Philozoid. Phil is also the character designer on Luna Sanctus Tactics, and became well known with his Shin Megami Tensei fan art, mainly focusing on characters that were from more obscure games in the series. Since joining, we've had a really fun time developing some of my initial ideas and coming up with a cohesive look for the game. He's an extremely talented artist with a keen eye for moody painterly effects.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking an interest in our project. I am really excited to be working on Liminal Cage and very grateful for the opportunity to bring the visuals of this experience to life for you all. This project is a fun departure from my much more fantasy-oriented work and has allowed me to really tap into different inspirations for the aesthetics of this game. I hope you guys will appreciate the many designs and illustrations we have put together. I think the game will have a unique spin on the JRPG aesthetic you may be accustomed to, and while nervous about the scope of the task, I am confident that the work we produce will be of quality. Thank you.
Secondly, I'd like to introduce our part-time programmer and co-designer, Kiba. Kiba is a voice actor and programmer specifically working in Unreal Engine 4, who's been helping prototype the systems over the last month. We're still early in development, but he has been invaluable in getting things started.
Hey everybody, I'm Kiba. Creating games has been a dream of mine ever since I was a little kid. After hearing about the game from Phil and Demi, I was excited to be a part of this and to help out where I can. For me, video games are about creating lifelong memories and sharing experiences with those around you, so I hope we can create a game that you can resonate with.
Thirdly, our voice director, Nick Valdebenito. Nick has worked as a voice director on a number of indie projects and will be helping audition the cast and directing their lines so the performances really shine.
Hello, I'm Nicholas Valdebenito. I am the voice director for Liminal Cage, and what I'm most excited about working in the game, in the BO side to be more precise, is going to be seeing everybody's performance when the time comes. I just know that there's gonna be a lot of good performances here, and buddy, they're gonna be amazing.
And lastly, we have Nikki Kalpa helping as cutscene director. Nikki is currently working on her successfully funded horror game, They Speak from the Abyss, but has offered to assist with making sure our cinematics are engaging and full of life. Take it away, Nikki. With all of these new talented people helping with the project, I'm excited to announce the formation of our team, Team Reliminality, and the title of our game, Liminal Cage. We'll continue to put out devlogs as much as we can, and we'll have plenty more to show you as the year goes on. So for now, thanks, and see you next time. Oh, before I go, I should introduce myself. I'm Demidevlog. I'm a composer and game developer who, besides working on this game, I also compose for games such as They Speak from the Abyss, Dreadweight, and Hyperspace Digital Retrograde. Follow me on Twitter or X or whatever it's called next week after somebody has another midlife crisis. Or join my Discord. Link is in the description. And if you like this video, please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment, and tell me what you think. Anyways, as for now,
we await your return, warrior.